welcome to this bonus edition of the Brain Candy Podcast. Happy holidays to you all. We wanted to share with you the audio from a live event we did with the University of Pittsburgh in November. This was our 5th year doing the event. It's usually live and people can come see it, but of course this year was very different. So we had a virtual event and a lot of Brainiacs were able to join us, but we wanted to share the event anyway because we thought it was so important. The theme of the event is always for Pitt's International Week, and we're invited by the English Language Institute to come and talk about travel and the importance of learning about other cultures and thinking globally and acting locally, all of those good things. And this year we thought it was important for us to have somebody on that could talk about the pandemic and the consequences of not thinking globally and the benefits of doing so. So we knew that we had to invite Larry Brilliant on. Larry was on Brain Candy years ago to talk about his book, Sometimes Brilliant. It's his memoir, and talk about his life, because he was among the people on a team that helped eradicate smallpox. He's had an incredible life. He's an epidemiologist and also, a hippy-dippy who's best friends with Wavy Gravy. I mean, come on. This guy is totally fascinating. But now this year has brought him back into the limelight because he's an important part of the coronavirus response. And his experience working on smallpox and, his expertise made him the perfect person to talk about what's going on and all of his thoughts on everything. So we just so enjoyed our conversation with him, and we wanted to share this event with all of you. We are so thankful that the University of Pittsburgh has us come back each year. It's such a fun event, and this year seemed more important than ever before. Because as we all sit in our homes, we still have to think globally. So we hope you enjoy this bonus episode with our special guest, Larry Brilliant, and maybe you can learn a little thing or two about the pandemic and Larry's amazing life. So remember to follow him on social if you are interested, Larry Brilliant. And thank you guys so much for all the support that you've given us throughout 2020, and we hope that we have provided you with some levity and some escape during a very difficult year for many people. So thank you all so much. Happy holidays, Happy New Year. Now please enjoy our event at the University of Pittsburgh with guest Larry Brilliant.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hello, friends.
He's so, formal and official, and we're like, hey, guys, we're here.
Yeah,
You need a little of both. I wanted to thank Rob for organizing this again. I know it was difficult because of the digital nature of it. But thank you to Pitt for having us. This is our 5th year. Thank you to Rob for organizing it. Thank you to USIS, as he said, who facilitates it. And, of course, our guest today, Larry Brilliant. Thank you to him. Sarah, can you believe they keep asking us back?
I know. I love it.
Well, they don't even learn their lesson.
I don't know if you could say don't even learn their lesson. More like I don't know if we'll ever run out of stuff to stop talking about on this subject.
Yeah, I mean,
for real.
It's kind of our passion project.
Yes.
And it's extra special tonight because it's election eve.
I know.
How are you feeling?
I'm cautiously hopeful and optimistic. I think it's the best thing I can do. 4 years ago, I remember I very nervously dove into a project on a weaver's loom that I had bought, and I was
I remember that.
Very anxious, and when I get anxious, I need to do a project. So I bought this little, DIY project weaver's loom, and I loomed or weaved or whatever the the word
the
is.
verb, right?
Left? I don't even know what it is. That's probably not even a word. A little like tapestry. And it's so cute, but I can't bring myself to hang it up because it just reminds me of, losses.
The outcome. And you didn't get the outcome you were hoping for.
I did from the piece of the item I was looming, but I did not from the election. So This year I've been doing some gardening. So I'm thinking gardening is better. I don't know why. It's like
nature's always the answer.
Nature's always the answer. Oh, always. Absolutely.
Well, we were enjoying during sort of like the minutes leading up to Rob's introduction, seeing where everybody that's here, here in the chat is watching from. That's been really fun. There's a lot of international people.
It's great.
At this event, which is like super cool because normally we're in person at University of Pittsburgh, and we do have some people that drive in to enjoy it, but it's really fun to see people from all over the world.
Heather says she's sending us good luck charms from the U.S. or to the U.S. from Canada for the results. So I like that.
I almost feel like Canadians are equally invested in this, and I'm not sure why, but I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean,
I am
this
sure.
This land is your land. This land is my land. So I feel like, I mean, we got to be protecting all of our natural resources, and that's like a really important part of it.
I thought it would be fun if we sort of began reminiscing about times past. This is our 5th year. And some of it I've blocked out apparently, but like our first year, Sarah and I were in this humongous auditorium and like 4 people showed up and most of them were related to me.
Yes.
But the show must go on, and we kept it going, and it was really fun. We had a great night. And then the second year was the Chinese dragon.
That your son always reminds us of, because that was,
He really loved that. He got to feed the dragon cabbage, and like they told him at the event that it was good luck and that it would bring us, I think they said financial reward.
Yes.
And he really counted on that. That we were going to like make it rain. And I don't know if we did, but he was really believing in that. Then the third year you didn't make it.
Nope, busy on a challenge.
I loved that one because we had Bill Eisler, who was Fred Rogers' best friend, and he runs the I think it's Family Communications, which is Fred Rogers, or maybe it's now called the Fred Rogers something company, but he still runs that, and that was really special.
Yeah.
And then the 4th year was last year, and that was about food and film. And what's not to love about that?
Yes.
And so this year was weird because 2020 is freaking weird. And we were like, how are we going to do this? And that's why I think Sarah and I both agreed that Larry was such a perfect choice.
I mean, perfect.
I mean, he's an epidemiologist and also just like a world traveler, hippie.
Oh my gosh. He embodies a global mindset.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Mm-hmm. Like everybody is unique and different, but all equal and all the same. And I just see, like, he's just such a special person.
He is a special person, but he's so humble.
Yes.
He's done all this amazing stuff, but he acts like he doesn't know what we're talking about.
Yeah. And he's excited to come on here. I'm like, quick, come on.
Yeah, nobody tell him.
Yeah. We're excited to have you here. Hello.
So Sarah and I spoke to him earlier today, and then we broke the interview up into clips so that we could show you. And the first clip that I'm going to show you, let me see. Oh, this was when, if you've seen Larry Brilliant's TED Talk, he, in 2006, did a TED Talk in which he predicted that we were due for a global pandemic. And during the TED Talk, he put up a slide to show how it would spread, which is, if you watch it now, is really disturbing because it's exactly how it did spread. But it's also helpful to know that people like him knew it was coming and can kind of handle it maybe better than politicians and people that have an agenda.
Yes.
I mean, they've been telling us for ages that you need to prepare and you need to get ready. But just to give you some more background about him, he, like I said, is a doctor. He worked for the World Health Organization, and he was on the panel that helped eradicate smallpox. And I think that when people hear that, they think it was like 50 years ago. Yeah. And it,
right. They don't, right. For sure, like, Suze.
It's not that.
I was like, smallpox?
Because it sounds like dysentery or something from like, what's that game that everyone plays?
Oregon Trail.
Yes, Oregon Trail. It sounds like it's that.
Died of dysentery. Yes. You've got contracted smallpox.
But millions of humans died from smallpox for centuries.
Yes.
Until they eradicated it by just basically going door to door. Yeah. And
vaccinating everyone.
Yeah, getting everybody sort of isolated and educated, and then ultimately where we are today, where nobody gets smallpox, thank God. So it was a real treat to be able to speak to him about what's going on now, because a lot of people are frightened and sad, and he isn't.
Right. You know, well, and you'll hear when he talks, and maybe a little bit about why that is.
Yes. Okay. Let's start. Let me see. And this could go terribly wrong. I mean, technology is my worst enemy. I'm going to try to share the first clip. Ooh, I see. I'm going to have to rewind it. Bear with me momentarily. Okay. Tell me if you can't hear it, Sarah. I was refreshing my memory. We spoke maybe 4 years ago when your book came out, Sometimes Brilliant, which everyone should read. And so much has changed since then. And I was refreshing my memory with your TED Talk, and that was years and years ago, and you were basically prophesying what has happened this year. What a weird thing, though, to be right about something tragic. How did that feel?
Well, you don't get any credit for predicting a pandemic if you're an epidemiologist. I think every epidemiologist in hindsight looks prescient. We've been saying that this was coming for decades because every year 2 or 3 zoonoses, animal viruses, spill over from animals to humans. And if I did a kind of catechism of the names, Ebola, SARS, MERS, H1N1, swine flu, bird flu, Zika, HIV, AIDS, West Nile, I could keep going. They're old friends, aren't they? You're familiar with them. But 25 years ago, 30 years ago, they didn't exist. They were viruses of bats or chimpanzees or other animals, and they jumped from animals to humans. We probably will see an increasing number over the coming years. Perhaps it will become 3 to 5 a year. Excuse me. Non-COVID cough. Important.
Larry.
Epidemiologists must put that asterisk on every cough. But
that's funny.
This cadence, 3 to 5 new viruses jumping from animals to humans, any one of which could have the attributes to become an epidemic or a pandemic. And that's what I was, I think you're talking about the TED Talk, the TED Prize Talk. And that's what I was talking about. We did a movie, Contagion.
Oh, yes.
I was the science advisor. But again, no credit for prescience when the science is so clear and obvious. if there's going to be a grading system, it's going to be a bunch of demerits for the politicians who didn't listen. It will be, for all of us, I think, we could, I don't know, forecast, foresee, predict that the virus would jump and that one or more of them would be bad. What no one could predict is an incompetent presidency. No one could predict is political malpractice and malfeasance in dealing with this outbreak. Denial, even today on the eve of the election, as we test the limits of 100,000 cases a day in the United States, as Britain, the UK, England are on the eve of closing down for the second time, a second lockdown, because they've been advised that there will be no hospital beds adequate in the National Health System hospital, National Health Service hospitals. And we're seeing kind of an echo of that in El Paso, in Utah. And in fact, what we're seeing in Utah is, kind of like a small echo of what we saw in Manhattan and Detroit when we saw these refrigerator trucks parked outside of hospitals to put bodies in because there was no more room in the hospitals. How can people underplay it, deny it, not resource it, not respond to it? That's what we didn't predict. Shame on us. We didn't predict that part of it.
All right, hold on.
And mute. Oh my gosh. It's terrifying to think about that he's right there with all of that. And he knew way ahead of time.
Hold on 1 second. Here we go. Sorry. That's what's really freaky to me when I watched his TED Talk, because I had watched it in preparation for my interview with him 4 years ago. And it's not like I didn't think it could be true. It's just like, well, what am I going to do about it if there's a pandemic looming?
Oh my God.
I'm just a girl. Like, what am I going to do about it? But watching it now, I realize how they were all saying it.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find that link.
And it feels like the problem isn't that we didn't know or even that we weren't unprepared. It's that there are a lot of political factors, and not just in the U.S., globally, that prevented swifter action. Because I watched another interview he did where because in his TED Talk, he said, the key to a pandemic is early detection, early response.
Yeah. Oh.
And he says, we got the early detection. That was amazing in comparison to, I think he said SARS or maybe swine flu. What was once 6 months is now 6 weeks. That was great. But the swift response varied depending on where you were. And it made all the difference. And a lot of that had to do with, politics and, it's complicated. And so that's the part that we really, as, citizens of the world, couldn't have changed. But you think if only, right?
If only.
If only.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what it was like for someone like Larry, who was like, hello, everyone.
Right. Well, that's what he says. Like, nobody wants to give you credit for being the one to
say the sky is falling.
Prevention. You don't get any awards for prevention. It's like, it's only when it's too late. Yeah. Where is he located? Where does he live?
He's in Northern California, like San Francisco still.
Mandy was wondering where he was located.
All right, let's take a break for 1 second from the amazing Larry Brilliant. Since we're talking about the pandemic anyway, what I need to tell you is what's made my quarantine so much more enjoyable, which is getting those HelloFresh deliveries that we yak about all the time. It's so great. You get all the ingredients right to your door for yummy food that you're going to love. You don't have to stress about meal planning or grocery store trips that nobody wants to make these days, so you can enjoy your cooking and get dinner on the table in about 30 minutes or less. I would never steer you wrong about yummy food, people. Plus, it's super flexible. You can customize your order every week. You can change your delivery day, your food preferences. You can skip a week if you need to. They have stuff for vegetarians and pescatarians. And most importantly, it's just delicious. And they have a deal for you guys. Go to HelloFresh.com/10BrainCandy and use code 10BrainCandy for 10 free meals, including free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/10BrainCandy and use code 10BrainCandy for 10 free meals, including free shipping. You guys know how much we love HelloFresh and Green Chef, and they work together. So now we know why. They're in cahoots and they make delicious food. Give it a try. All right, back to Larry.
Yeah. So, as I think, I forget if he said in that, did he say in that clip that he worked on Contagion, or that he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was a consultant on that film. And at the time they were trying to create this airborne virus that would be great for a film. Luckily, COVID is far less deadly.
Right.
But I also think that's a double-edged sword, because I think that prevents people from taking it more seriously.
Absolutely. And because when I think about the things in that movie that really, I remember watching Contagion and like finishing that movie and being like, okay, so now I'm basically an expert and work for the CDC. So let's look at the R0 numbers and let's look at the rate of transmission. And basically like, yes, I was like nuts with it. I was like, I'm an expert now. But no, it was not good. But it really, to me, it showed that if you really looked at the numbers and looked at it's still real bad. And it's very close to the numbers that were terrifying in that movie. So, yeah. And Denise says she was also like that after watching the movie, so I'm not alone. I went around like, okay.
I think that's good, though, because then people have at least a framework for it. Okay, so the next clip I'll show you. And by the way, after we're done showing Larry's clips, Sarah and I have some other stuff that we want to share with you. So we just want to get the interview clips up for you. Okay, so the next clip, this is fun. So in his TED Talk, he shares how for smallpox, they had to go door to door in India and get people to admit that they had smallpox or knew someone in their house with it, and then convince them to trust their expertise. So we wanted to find out how the heck you do that.
And this is great because Luann asked what countries other than the U.S. have faced the same political division over a response. And he talks a little bit about that.
Well, and as someone married to a British person and who's about to go into Britain's going back into lockdown, I think we know that the Western world is not doing a great job at the moment. No. Okay. Let me find it. I know you might think, Susie's terrible at this. This is like me.
That's great.
Doing great.
You're crushing it. Oh, and before you press play, if you guys are new to Zoom or are wondering how to change any of the settings or anything like that, you can see there's a little green bar at the top of your screen that should say you are viewing Susie Meister's screen. And next to that should have a little drop-down menu that says View Options. And if you click that, you can change the layout and you can change what you see. So if it's looking a little blurry, you can click down and just hit original size, and it'll show you in a more clearer view.
Okay, here we go. Well, and I've been thinking so much about how people in your position are being undermined by certain politicians. Science and expertise is sort of under attack. And I was thinking about how when you were working on the smallpox pandemic, you had to go door to door to talk to people and convince them to isolate, etc. And I wondered how, because that was in India, and I'm wondering, how did you build trust as a Western hippie? I mean, which is what you were. Why did they even trust you? And maybe how could we accomplish that now when people are distrustful towards experts?
I think the hippies were the most trusting.
I agree.
So it was really hard in India, not least of all because the vaccine that is used to prevent smallpox, which was the very first vaccine in history, it's a different virus that is given as a vaccine to protect you against smallpox. And the name of that virus is vaccinia. The name vaccinia, of course, led to all vaccines being called vaccines after that. But vaccinia etymologically comes from the Latin vacus, or cow, because it's cowpox. So the way you prevent smallpox is by giving someone a immunization with cowpox.
Oh.
However, in India, cows are venerated, and in order to make the vaccine, you had to kill cows.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
Imagine a righteous indignation and a huge anti-vax movement that began. In fact, I wish I had it to show you, but when Edward Jenner devised the idea of the first vaccine in the late 1790s, the anti-vax movement, I guess, began 5 or 6 years later. The moment there was a vaccine, there was an anti-vax movement. And there's a great political cartoon from 1805. That's how long ago it was, showing a group of people, and they had bovine characteristics and bulls jumping out of their nose and arms that give birth to cows, because that's what they thought would happen if you take a disease of cows, take the pus from a pox lesion and put it into somebody's arms. They thought it would turn into cows, which is what began the anti-vax movement. So no, it wasn't easy to get the population in India. It took a long time. And the government had as many people as Trump, as much as Donald Trump denies the existence of COVID, so too there were government officials who denied the existence of smallpox as a problem. But there were many more wonderful Indian officials. Muni Inder Dev Sharma, we called him M.I.D. Sharma, who was a saintly doctor at the head of the Indian program. And we also had some amazing saintly doctors on our side, too. Bill Foege, who I'm sure you've heard of now, who was the head of CDC. He wrote the famous letter 3 weeks ago advising Redfield to resign. So we had wonderful people, but it took a long time, and it was not easy. And every vaccine campaign, the polio eradication program, has had a huge amount of anti-vax. Every vaccination campaign encounters resistance, anti-vax movements, and it's understandable because you're dealing with an odorless, tasteless, invisible virus. That how could that little tiny thing cause the disease this bad? Why should I risk my child, my mother, my brother to something that I don't know? I think we need to be understanding and compassionate, not be arrogant of people who have legitimate fears of will a vaccination or any medication do more harm than good. And never has that been tested as much as it will be when we have 8, 9, 10 vaccines against COVID that are all nearing a finish line. I'm not going to say the finish line because we'll get what's called an efficacy signal. We will know that these vaccines protect you against COVID. We are getting confusing safety signals, whether these vaccines are safe. Mm-hmm. And it's one thing to say that in giving it to 15,000 people, it appears to be safe. It's another thing to say that when we give it to 6 billion people, it will still remain without side effect.
No pressure.
Yeah, right. But so here's what I don't get about you. You seem like unflappable. You don't ever seem hopeless like the rest of us who like want to cry every day. I really do want your tips and advice on how you maintain optimism and steadiness, as you seem to, at least?
You know what I used to say before Trump, because I think that's like, remember the old days when there'd be diving contests? You know, somebody would have to do a dive, and they said it had a 7 or 8 level of difficulty. I think staying calm most years is a 7 or 8 level difficulty. I think in the era of Trump, maintaining calm is a 25 level difficulty.
Yeah.
But thanks for saying that. That makes me feel better. That because I feel we all kind of feeling that. So it's nice to know that the academics agree.
How do you like that? Oh, you're muted, my beloved.
There you go. Oh man, it really is interesting to know that we've had anti-vaxxers for forever.
I honestly did not know that.
I had no idea. And that really shows that change is going to be hard for some people.
Well, and he's right that we shouldn't be arrogant, because if you have a legitimate concern because that's my impulse, is to be like, you're so stupid, come on. Mm-hmm. But it's scary. Mm-hmm. And people deal with that in different ways. Mm-hmm. And so for some people, it's like, well, I'm not going to get a vaccine. You know, I don't want to take the risk. Mm-hmm. So to know that that's been going on forever was shocking. But also, as Sarah, you said, it's kind of heartening.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, it's not anything new. There were always the people who were like, you know, it's so silly because I always thought that about, like, my mom would say that with every single generation, the generation before it hates their music. That, like, that's never going to stop. No matter what, you're always going to be like, turn that down. And then the kids are going to be like, if it's too loud, you're too old. And, like, nothing's changed. You know, the music can be different, but yeah.
Well, Sarah, on an episode, I don't even know when, long time ago, we talked about how, like, if you look at, let's say you look at skincare advertisement from the 60s.
Right.
You're like, oh my God, I can't believe people believed that this face wash was going to make them look younger. But, like, when I see one now, I'm like, ooh, I need that face wash. Yeah. But I feel like it's the same with this situation. When you look at, like, in 18, whatever he said, where people think they're going to look like a cow if they get the vaccine.
How different is that than thinking,
it applies,
oh my God,
yeah, it's the same. Like, if you can look at the old-timey ones, you see the absurdity of it.
Yep. And, you know, there was still the same snake oil salesman, that there's still the same kind of, like, magic cure-all, like, yes.
Well, because...
interesting.
You know... Jim and Tammy Faye Baker from the 80s, of course. Famous evangelicals who were, you know, got caught up in a scandal, whatever. Well, I'm friends with Jay Baker, their son, and he is not like them at all and really has had to deal with the trauma of being their child. But, you know, his dad, Jim Baker, he's out of jail after all the stuff from the 80s, but now he's back on Christian television and he's selling, like, products to, like, combat COVID. And so when you just said snake oil, it made me think of it, because
it is that.
Even if it's well-intentioned, it probably isn't going to cure COVID. I think it's...
Leave that job to Larry, please, and people who are like...
But wasn't it interesting how, like, their religion, you know, the sacred nature of cows could prevent them from maybe getting this medicine. And I see it now. With, yeah. Oh my. And, you know, everything changes, but it stays the same.
It does. And because... I don't know if it's because I understand it less or because I understand Christianity more or what it is, but I can understand people being like, oh, no, cows are sacred. That's from a cow. Like, I can see the logic behind that. Yes. I don't agree with it, but I can absolutely see that.
I sympathize.
But
that would be a terrible dilemma.
Right here, when it's very close to me, like in the situation right here, where people are being like, "Oh, I don't want to wear a mask," I'm like, "What? That's ridiculous." You have and
so I think
more compassion for people.
Like, I'm intolerant in a way, but I think we should be compassionate.
Yes.
When we were going out the other day, my mom was like, "Do you want me to wear a mask that isn't about Trump?"
I don't even care what it's about. Just wear it. I
was like, that's very nice of you to ask me that. I appreciated that. Okay, wait. So the next clip. Okay, Sarah, you bring up to him the patterns of doubt, like you're saying now, how it was heartening to hear that. And then he talks about how he wants to know, like, us to spend more time thinking about how does this end. Let me share it.
In listening to hearing you talk about smallpox and kind of the patterns that we've seen before, believe it or not, there's a little bit of that has given me kind of some peace, because you're telling me that we've had vaccine deniers, we've had governments that have said, no, this is not a thing. And somehow the people like you have been able to educate people, able to, get those vaccines out there and get the information out there. And so maybe that gives a little ray of hope for me that,
the sound of that.
Deep breath, because it's a lot the same.
That we will toss COVID into the dustbin of history. I don't think we've adequately asked ourselves, what does success look like? How does this end? I don't think that we've spent enough time playing out the various scenarios. Does COVID, like 4 other coronaviruses before it, does it circulate and lose power and then go to the retirement home for coronaviruses?
Right.
Which is what 4 previous coronaviruses have done. They are now colds. Every year when you get a cold, there's about a dozen viruses that circulate. About 3 or 4 or 5 of them are rhinoviruses, and 4 of them are coronaviruses. They're sister or cousin or brother viruses of COVID. There are also 2 other really bad coronaviruses, SARS and MERS, that had death rates of 20% and 30% respectively, that are coronaviruses. So you've got 6 other viruses in the family with characteristics that are the same in many ways, different in others. Which one will COVID become, and how can we help it become the one that goes away? I think that is pretty straightforward for epidemiology. What's not straightforward is adding the challenges to democracy and the rise of the strong man, the nationalism that has grown up in the shadow of 70 years of globalism, which has kept the world safe. That's, I think, the undercurrent that at least more than the disease, that undercurrent of nationalism and the kind of centrifugal forces that are pulling us apart, I think that is a different kind of dis-ease. Mm-hmm. And when you put them both together, we may not be consciously saying, well, 40% of my anxiety is coronavirus and 60% is politics. But I think that's why, you go around when you talk to friends, you look in their eyes, you see the same thing that they see in your eyes. Confusion, doubt, fear, anxiety.
Marcus says he makes me feel safe. I agree. It really does make you feel a little better to hear him talk.
Yeah, he's so well balanced and not hysterical like I have been.
Well, because I watched Contagion once, and I know just enough to be dangerous. And he's like, it was about me. Let me just put your mind at ease and everything's okay. And yes.
I wanted to know, Sarah, so Amber submitted this question to our Q&A, which you guys should do if you'd like us to answer anything during the broadcast. She said, do you think the change in presidents will have a big impact on COVID numbers in the U.S.? Curious Canadian. What do you think, Sarah?
I mean, I feel like it how can it not? I feel like just with the seriousness that things are taken and just being able to practice like safe practices and close down if things need to be closed down and kind of follow what other countries are doing. You know, I feel like we need to be a little less individualistic and a little more collective in these current times.
I think it will be very difficult for people who are distrustful towards medical professionals, politicians, any kind of system besides their church. So I think it would take a lot of collaboration with religious institutions to mobilize.
I didn't even think about that.
I think there's a lot of overlap there.
Yes, there is.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh.
But I sure hope so. I hope whoever wins that there is a shift towards collective action rather than like every man for himself.
Right.
That's how it feels now.
Because like every man for himself does not work on a pandemic. It doesn't work for a lot of stuff, but especially something that is that communicable, it spreads.
I think it's so interesting, though, as someone who studies religion, that a lot of the folks who kind of are feeling like this is overblown and not that big of a deal, and maybe even think it's a hoax, are, as Larry said, because it's an invisible, odorless, blah, 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 are the same people who believe in something you can't see. I mean, that's what faith is.
I never even really thought about that.
So it's kind of like...
Maybe you just have like a pool, like a well for like faith. And once you've used all that up...
tapped out.
It's tapped out. You're like, I can't have faith in anything else because I'm putting...
Like you believe some dude rose from the dead. Blah, blah, blah. You get it.
Yeah.
Okay, but Ashley Devine in our chat said you'd be surprised how many people in healthcare are convinced this will go away after the election tomorrow.
That it will go...
I hope it does.
That it will go away after the election.
Well, because that's what... Some people think this is a political situation.
Right. Correct, yeah. But it's like... No, the amount of, I see somebody like Larry, and I couldn't imagine when you have somebody who's like been on those front lines and has gone door to door and seen like what happens when millions die from smallpox or, whatever it is, that would just be so frustrating. Like that wouldn't even be that word doesn't even come close to describing it to people who are like, maybe. Like, he understands that it is really serious. And, like, I feel like that's such a big slap in the face for somebody who's seen it.
Yeah, if you've experienced loss as a result, that would feel very... frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
And that Allie asked a real good question. Shout out to Allie. She said, "Doesn't everyone at this point know someone who has had COVID?" Yeah,
I think that a lot of people do, but they don't think that it's as serious as, "Hey, go in your house and don't come out." Like they think it's like the flu, and we don't stay in our houses for the flu. So I think they equate it in that way.
I mean, I know enough people now who have died.
Yeah,
where it's that's And my mom's all like tied up in Costa Rica and protected and safe, but then somebody had a party and now 10 people in her building have it and she's on lockdown now.
Right.
So everybody
it comes around.
It does.
Danny asked a good question. what do we do with family members who believe this is a hoax and don't believe in wearing masks and social distancing? I am dealing with that myself.
Yeah, what do you do, Suze?
I mean, we are applying boundaries, but it's really hard because if you love someone, it feels hurtful to them.
Yes.
And they think you're crazy.
Sometimes healthy boundaries do feel like that.
Yeah, it's basically like, okay, so you know how I think COVID is the great clarifier and whatever was existing before just gets bigger. It's like that. Yes. So you probably needed the boundaries with these people before.
Yes, that is excellent point.
But this just makes it more urgent and more obvious.
Yes.
And hard.
You know what? I always say with boundary setting, and this does work, you can think of it kind of like a mobile. And you know how, like, you know, there's strings hanging off the little mobile, like, and when you change, you adjust and you set boundaries and you say, like, we're not going to do this or we're going to do this. You adjust your string on the mobile. And what it does is it makes it all of a sudden wonky. So you have to wait until everybody else adjusts theirs or it's going to feel a little wonky. And that is the hard part, to just understand that the imbalance is because until other people kind of change.
But if you do it with kindness, I don't think, I mean, how bad can it be? Well, I don't know. Okay.
Find people who I think, you know, we've always talked about, you know, of course your family is family, but then you can also choose your family and you can choose the people who, you know, you are going to spend time with that, like, follow the rules and do the right thing. And
Luann wants to know if I have wine in this gigantic mug. Of course I do. No, what if I was like, it's straight tequila?
Well, I'm drinking out of one of our Brain Candy magic mugs that only gets super exciting when it's warm and it's just water. And so it's just a black mug for now. But if it were hot, it would say Brain Candy on it.
Oh, God. Okay, so the next clip is, I wanted to know because Larry spent 10 or 12 years in India working on the smallpox pandemic, and I wanted to know if his experience living in another culture and traveling had an impact on his life. Obviously it has, but I just wanted him to articulate that. So let me find that clip.
Gosh, he traveled so many cool places.
Number 4. Here we go. And play. Given that so much of your work early on was international, it was in India and elsewhere, I wanted to ask you, since the theme of the Pitt event is it's for International Week, I wanted to ask you how you felt being exposed to different cultures and traveling had an impact. Did it have an impact on who you are as a human being and or your work?
Yeah, it changed me completely. But before we talk about that, let me mention that 10 years ago, before this coronavirus had emerged, even before SARS or MERS had emerged, at Pitt, at the School of Public Health, there was a dean whose last name was Burke. And he predicted that the next pandemic would be a coronavirus. And he then became it's very funny because it became the Pittsburgh Center for Biosecurity, but it was located in Baltimore. Don't ask me how this stuff.
That's classic Pittsburgh. That's funny.
But we owe him a great debt of gratitude for having the foresight of seeing that no one had really thought of a coronavirus as a human disease. Prior to that, we thought of it as an animal disease, which it mostly is. So going back to your question about globalism and world travel, I lament the fact that I could be a hippie on a psychedelic bus, go to a Pink Floyd concert in Glastonbury, and then drive to Kathmandu. And along the way, with 40 other hippies, strange paint job, on our bus that I could live in Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan, go up into the mountains of Afghanistan, and then live for 10 years in India. And my children will not be able to have that experience. And those countries have become radicalized, with the exception of India, maybe Pakistan. They become radicalized in part by the Western powers, colonialism, neocolonialism, all those factors. It's not just, of course, it's not just what the Western powers did. It's also the fight of great religions. It goes right back to Susie's entire training, understanding the tension between religions and religious theory in many ways. But that's watching that, learning about that is really important.
I just want to see pictures of him as a hippie with some.
He was super cute.
I can imagine.
And his wife as well. She used to be called Elaine, cool. But now she's called, I think it's Gurja, because she took on a different name when they were in India. But he's so freaking cool.
Yeah. And
normally with hippies, you associate them with peace, love, dope, and slacker kind of, like the pot thing.
Yeah.
But in fact, we'll hear later how his guru is sort of responsible for this all, but he doesn't go into it. But I'll tell you that this guru that he'll mention later basically said, Larry, he had a medical degree, but he was in India, at a monastery, meditating and being a hippie. And the guru was like, put your suit on and get to work. And I really give that guy credit for saying you have something that is special and you need to share your gift. And I feel that of all of us.
That gives me goosebumps, Susie.
Each of us have these gifts and we ought to be using them, whatever they are.
Yes.
And I told Adam today that the thing that I feel when I feel hopeless is at least I have brain candy, that we can communicate to people and encourage them to vote, encourage them to do good.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's sad.
Questions, think a little bit differently.
Yeah. And he is sort of my hero in that regard. Yeah. Because he could have just stayed at that monastery and kept that tunic on and whatevs. But he was like, now I got to get to work. Sometimes you got to get to work.
Yep. What a calling.
Right? And he has so many gifts, so we can see what that amounted to. The next clip sort of touches upon the same idea that we spoke about in a recent episode where it was I said that I feel like being in quarantine gave me a Christmas Carol experience where I had the ghost of Christmas past and present and future. And then I could sort of make decisions about what I wanted to happen. And I feel like that's what happened to Larry kind of too. Because I asked him, have you been reflecting on your life?
Yeah.
And all of that jazz.
I wonder, how old was he when he went to, because he said
he was 30.
Wow. Okay. That would be around the time.
Yeah. That is he was young, but old enough to know that he had to do it.
That's right. When you decide, you're like, oh, you start to hear your calling.
And in this clip, he says the book, but he's referring to his book, Sometimes Brilliant, is being made into a TV show, which would be a great TV show. And
I wanted to ask him, who's going to play him?
That's a great question.
I know! And I couldn't ask him because, what if he got, nervous, or what if he's it's not going to be, me as the character? I didn't know.
What if it's Steve Buscemi? Something
like that. Who can we see playing him?
Oh, let me think.
Fun. It would have to be somebody who's young and that's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that.
You're going to be good at this game.
Cool. Let me play the clip. Number 5. Let's find it. Susan, Where's the clip? Okay. Here we go. But yeah, you have lived some kind of life. I was saying to Sarah, like, it sounds made up, Lair.
It is.
Now, do you reflect on it now and think this was bonkers, or it's just like you're too close to the Monet, so you...
Is it all over? Is that why I should be...
Yeah, is this your memorial?
No.
I mean, because I feel this year has been a year of reflection. Like, so many of us are, like, reflecting on our life and taking stock in a way. So I imagined you were, too.
Yeah, I mean, our house does a lot of Buddhist meditation. We live one foot in the spiritual world. So we do a lot of different religious practices and study a lot of different religions and spiritual traditions. So you're always doing that kind of self-reflection. But I don't do it with the historicity that I think it may seem. That book is being made into a television series, which I guess will give me a chance to go, yeah!
Oh, my God. For real?
So it was hard enough to have a book come out with my name on it, let alone to have a television series come out. But that'll be, if that ever gets finished, as TV series are want to do, many of them get started, not so many get finished. That'll be interesting. No, I think that the elements of what career makes you happy, what is fit for you, how do you find your destiny, your calling? We used to call it in the Christian tradition, we used to call it your calling. How do you find that? Is that something that finds you, which I think would make more spiritual sense? I was really lucky because I didn't even know of epidemiology, probably couldn't have pronounced it when I was in college. When I went to medical school, if I ever learned about smallpox, I don't remember ever learning about it in medical school. And these are not things that I would have done on my own if I hadn't met a wise man, a guru, a teacher, and have him point me in this direction. Actually, point me in this direction, kick me in the butt, toss me off, put me on a butt, all of those things. It wasn't just
I love that.
It wasn't like Junipo Serrera just pointing, there's a nice place, go there.
I'm glad you were open to it, to the kick in the pants or whatever it took. We're all so grateful that you went along with it.
Well, yeah, he was a pretty good kicker.
I need a kicker. I love that.
I like hearing him talking about, like, finding your calling.
Sarah, right? What do you think, though? You asked the question to them. What do you think?
I was asking, is it something that finds you, or do you find it? And
I think it can go either way.
I was going to say, maybe sometimes it's hard to even know what, like, if you listen to it at a different time, like, it almost feels like it found me if you were to ask me when I was younger, but now it almost is like, now I feel like I made a decision and I'm here because I found it.
You said yes to it.
Yeah, I said, oh
my God, are we at church right now?
Oh, that's it.
But it's true.
If it comes knocking, you got to say yes to it, just like he did, and just like, I got tickled. Just like he had the Buddhist, what would we even call him? Like spiritual guru.
His guru, yeah.
His guru say, you need to put on the suit and you need to go do your job. Wow, that's crazy. Which is like the opposite of what you'd think the guru.
Well, and sometimes don't you think, like, we know?
Yes.
But, like,
sometimes it means we actually have to, like, do the work. I was like,
yeah.
Oh, now I have to go to grad school and I have to get 3,000 hours. It's going to take forever. But
yeah, it's not always the easy road.
It's not. But the easy road, I say this sometimes with clients, that I use the analogy of like going sledding. Like when you go sledding and you're climbing up a hill to go sledding down, you have to, in order for it to be a really fun ride, you have to climb up sometimes a really tall hill. And you, like, the harder the climb, the more enjoyable and more fun the ride down is. And if you were just to like quit halfway and be like, it's too hard, you wouldn't get the good fun ride.
And that's the sense I get from Larry, is certainly not that his path is easy, but that it's so rewarding.
Yes.
And it's so fulfilling that it's okay. And it's all worth it. And it steadies him. And that's what I think we all crave.
Yes.
But I do think that was such an important point that he brought up, and like how, like the importance of mentors too. That person that does kick you in the butt and say like, come on. You need to go out and do something you might not really want to do.
Yeah.
Because if that guy didn't tell him that, he might not have done that, and smallpox wouldn't have been friggin' cured.
And if that guy, and even before that, we have to put ourselves out there and kind of expose ourselves to those things. I heard recently that this like rule of thirds, where you want to spend a third of your time with people who are less fortunate or have like less to, like you can offer them something. You want to spend a third of your time with people who are kind of like in the same boat and you guys can kind of like vibe together. And then a third of your time with people who are going to push you or enlighten you or teach you a thing
Kick you in the pants.
Kick you in the pants.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's great advice. Okay. So the next clip is when I forced Larry to tell Sarah a story about one of his adventures. This was before he went to India, before he worked for the World Health Organization. And he had an adventure already. Let's see. I believe. Okay. But yeah, you have lived some kind of life. I was saying to Sarah, like, it sounds made up, Lair.
It is.
Now, do you reflect on it now and think this was bonkers, or it's just like you're too close to the Monet, so you don't...
Is it all over? Is that why I should be...
Yeah, is this your memorial?
No.
I mean, because I feel this year has been a year of reflection. Like, so many of us are like reflecting on our life and taking stock in a way. So I imagined you were too.
Yeah, I mean...
Somebody said they can't see the video. Is that everyone or just Katie? Sarah, can you see it? Huh.
I think that it might be there's just like a little there's like a little notice. So I think if you click on that video, you can like remove the little notice on your, it just like there's like something.
Me, Susie?
Yeah. I don't know why. If you try clicking on that video from your desktop. And I think they say that this one is one.
Our house does a lot of Buddhist meditation.
That we heard.
We live 1 foot in the...
Oh, yeah.
That's so weird.
Yeah. So I think it'll be the next one.
Oh, I see. Okay. Let me try this one. Okay, wait. I wanted you to tell Sarah about it, because I don't think she knows. It was in your book, I believe, where you talked about going to Alcatraz. Mm-hmm. And I wanted you to tell this story to Sarah because I wanted her to see her reaction. So go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I love a story.
So I was doing my internship in San Francisco. This is 1969. You were not born yet. So this is ancient history. It might have been 1970 by then. Internships begin the 1st of July, so I think it had become 1970. And I had been active in the anti-war movement, but one of the elements of the anti-war movement that hadn't been so well known is that a group of Native Americans searching for their own identity, their own culture, took over Alcatraz Island. And the reason they took it over was that among the many treaties with Native Americans that we broke was the Treaty of Laramie, which was the foundational treaty between Native Americans and White Eyes, as we were called. And that foundational treaty said that the new colonialists will take over native lands, but if ever they are not being used, if they're being disused, they immediately revert back to the Native American tribes from which they came. We signed that treaty. 3 presidents signed that treaty. So, of course, we broke that treaty, and we broke it very visibly in the case of Alcatraz Island, because after it was decommissioned as a prison island, we didn't give it back. We just kept it sitting there and did nothing with it. And the Native Americans who should have owned it made petition after petition. You're allowed to petition for redress against your government, and they were ignored. So a group of Native Americans took over Alcatraz, and they held it for over a year. During that period of time, Nixon was president, and he threatened all sorts of harsh things. He got the Coast Guard to do an embargo around the island to quarantine it. So no food, no medicine, no doctors legally could come to the island. Well, of course, that meant that every hippie and every rock musician came to the island. So
heck yeah!
Coffee St. Marie.
I was just going to say, this island is sounding better and better by the second as you describe it.
It's fair to say that in the late 1960s, the best music in the world could be heard on this island.
And San Francisco, which is hop, skip, and a jump. You got all those guys.
You know, all those musicians in San Francisco lent their voice. Not only that, but all the elite sailing clubs and yacht clubs.
Wow.
And not letting doctors and medicine come to the island was a crock of shit. So they used their elaborate yachts to run the Coast Guard quarantine. And by the way, the Coast Guard was also in favor of the Indians. And a poll that was taken at that time, it would have been 90% Indians, 10% Nixon. Along the lines, one woman, Lee Trudell, who with her husband were two of the many leaders of that, her pregnancy had advanced, and she was nearly 9 months pregnant. This would have been her 3rd child, and she wanted to give birth to this child on Indian-held land, a very deep emotional tie to the land. And there was no water. There was no electricity. There were no doctors. There was no medical care. And a San Francisco columnist named Herb Cain, who was well known in those days, he kept on writing in his column, what are we made out of that there's no doctor willing to go out on the island to help with her delivery, that there's no medicine? What kind of people are we? A challenge of the moral fiber of Americans dealing with what seemed like a pretty reasonable request of a woman to give birth on the place that she was living. And after about 6 weeks of this, I said to myself, well, this is increasingly sounding like an advertisement for me.
Yeah.
And I lived on the island for several weeks leading up to the birth of this.
Oh, my gosh, you were her midwife. I mean, doctor, but, you know.
Oh, no, I was much more midwife than doctor.
Yes, I feel like that's like the elevated title in this situation. That's amazing.
Named this child Wovoka, which is really important in the history of the relationships between Indians and non-Indians, non-Native people. Wovoka historically was the Paiute Sioux Indian medicine man who gave birth to the idea of the ghost dance religion, which had as an element of it that if you practiced these chants and you practiced this religion and you wore this garment, you would be impervious to the bullets of the American army. And of course, Sitting Bull and Geronimo were adherents of this ghost dance religion, and much of the war history between the Native Americans and the U.S. cavalry were based on this bravery that the braves, the Indians, felt. And so by naming this child Wovoka, they were incorporating the history of Native Americans. And Wovoka, when he died, he said, and he had died just about 200 years before this event on Alcatraz. He said, I will die and I will be gone for 200 years and I will circle the earth. Sort of like a Native American echo of Hindu reincarnation. Yeah. And he said that I'll come back and I will, didn't use the word reincarnate, but I will return. And when I come, the bad part of the white man's way will go and the buffalo will return. So this prophecy was all tied up in the birth of Wovoka on native land on Alcatraz. And I was there for it. And after the baby was born, there was a lot of stuff that went on the island that would take longer than our podcast to talk about it. But I came back in a Coast Guard boat. And when I came back, it seemed like every television camera on Earth was pointed in my face, asking me, what do the Indians want? And I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I had never met an Indian until I went out to Alcatraz. But some people from Warner Brothers saw me on television and offered me a part in this movie, which was about hippies and rock concerts. So I became a rock doc.
Oh, my gosh.
He's like Forrest Gump, but better.
Yes. But and real.
I haven't had enough chocolates, though. I need more chocolates.
That's all you need. That's all.
Oh, my gosh. I love it.
Come on now.
I mean, he delivered a baby during that time on that island.
It's bonkers.
And then he just reads the newspaper article and goes, yeah, I'm feeling like a call to action to do that.
And then that was sort of the beginning. That's when, then he went in, he was in that movie, then he went to India and it got even crazier after that.
That really is like a calling then from that newspaper. And if he didn't answer that, it would have been all, wow, that's cool.
I think it's cool that he's a mix too, that he went and did that and then the cameras were on him and he didn't shrink and feel like I'm a scientist or I'm a doctor. He was like, yeah, this is fun too. And he could handle both sides of it. I wanted to address a couple questions in our Q&A. Amber said, what advice would you give single ladies or fellas who would prefer not to die alone and want to find a partner, but pandemic, LOL. We were talking about this right before we started, actually. It's complicated, isn't it?
It is.
What's your advice, Sarah?
Well, I mean, this is always my advice, is I say find things that you like to do. And so explore your hobbies. And so before we were talking about on a podcast about like the Sierra Club, I think things that are outside are really fun.
Because you could do it safely.
Yeah.
Not it.
Right. There's a lot of, I feel like if you almost have to change change the way that you think about it, instead of I'm going to go somewhere to find a person, it's like I'm going to go somewhere to do something that I like to do.
Yeah.
And there may be another human there that I can.
I like that.
Because really what it comes down to is like we ain't changing anybody, Everybody is who they are. So you got to find the person who's like, you want to change the least, or who's like just as is, like stock off the shelf is close enough to what you are you're like, okay, I can deal with that. And, I always go like, what do you like to do? Because for me, it was like, I want to find somebody that I can camp. What do I like to do for my trips? I want to spend time in nature. I want to camp. I want to be outdoorsy, and I want to be able to like disconnect. I got to find somebody who wants to do those things, because what do I want my days off to look like, down the road? So think about what you like to do.
And Marcus wants to know, in regards to what he said about travel, do you think the, quote, radical negative aspects of the countries he mentioned are newer, or have they always been there? And because of how connected the world is now, we are just more aware of it than in the 70s. No, I don't think we're more aware of it. Yeah. Well, we might be more aware of it, but these are new because of the nature of digital media and the way that misinformation, disinformation spreads digitally has changed and makes radicalization far easier.
Yeah. I mean, I hear stories about my mom traveling all over the world in places that I don't think I would be able to go today.
Yeah.
That is how it is. And you kind of just have to, like I said, change how you do it, change maybe what you're seeking, what you're, there are some kind of like positives maybe you could even think that come from all of this, that maybe some places that like the normal tourist destinations might not be the places on the list anymore. It might be some of the more like off the beaten path places, going and finding that, like, I don't know, Airbnb in the middle of nowhere in Montana and connecting them that way by disconnecting.
The next clip was some of your questions that you submitted on our Instagram for Larry. And I think he makes an important point about how prevention would be far more effective, but we don't fund prevention because it's hard for people to conceptualize that. And so we end up funding cures instead. And I thought that was really insightful. So let's play that clip. Okay, wait. I wanted you to tell Sarah about, because I don't think she knows.
The same thing again?
Yes. Why does it keep doing that? We
Really?
don't want that. We want this one. Hold on. Let's try again. Well, we asked our listeners to submit some questions. Will you indulge a couple, Larry?
Of course.
Okay, Sarah, you're up.
All right. So this one, I feel like it was kind of like insider information that maybe if you know, you know. But she asked, did you, through the Skoll Foundation, which ? That was what I was going to ask you. What the heck is that? Did see this pandemic coming and at this scale? So first question is, what the heck is the Skoll Foundation for me? And then for her, did you see this coming?
Well, I am on the board of directors of the Skoll Foundation and have been for 13 years. Skoll Foundation was started by Jeff Skoll, who's a very dear friend and a wonderful man. He was the first president of eBay. He now owns, among other things, Participant Media, which has made some of the best movies you guys have ever seen, from Lincoln and The Visitor, The Soloist, won lots of Academy Awards. And that's Jeff's heart and mind and vision. And the Skoll Foundation gives every year, previously, it's undergoing some changes now, previously has given every year about 5 prizes or awards, each $1.5 million, to social entrepreneurs who are working around the world to do good things, ending female genital mutilation, stopping HIV/AIDS, working on climate change, working on pandemics. And every year until the pandemic, we would meet in Oxford for the Skoll Week and bring together the foundations and the movie companies and, all the people that support these wonderful social entrepreneurs. And we're now doing an expansive version of that. And Jeff, of course, in his wonderful, amazing way, announced that he was going to give hundreds of millions of dollars to help stop the pandemic. So we're actively engaged in trying to use that money in the wisest and fairest and safest possible way. So the Skoll Foundation in 2000, so I was vice president of Google, and I was running Google.org, a philanthropy. And I was on the board of Skoll, and Jeff offered me a job to start another foundation called Skoll Global Threats Fund. And one of the threats that we worked on was pandemics, beginning in 2009. So I think it's fair to say that Jeff was prescient, that he saw this.
Wow.
The movie Contagion came out of that. Jeff was the executive producer of Contagion, and Participant was one of the studios involved in making it. Scott C. Burns, the wonderful Scott C. Burns, wrote it, and Steven Soderbergh directed it. Many, many amazing people. But Jeff was like many things, it came out of Jeff's heart and his mind. So that's the origin. So when someone says, did the Skoll Foundation see the pandemic coming? Absolutely. And continues to fund a group called Ending Pandemics. Skoll is a major funder of it, run by a good friend of mine, Mark Smolinski. And Ending Pandemics works all over the world, trying to end the next one, of which there certainly will be, unless we do something pretty dramatic to improve public health and detection and response.
Well, this question ties right in with that. And we had a listener ask, how can public health be elevated as a higher priority in better overall health care?
You have an amazing professor on the faculty of Carnegie Mellon, very close to where you sit. His name, when I went to high school with him, was Barry Fishoff. His name is now Baruch Fishoff. He's professor of risk communications. And he has written extensively on this subject of how can public health and how can risk, we're still evolving from that same humanoid that worried about that, saber-toothed tiger or other risk. We have a reptilian brain that's gone away. But the ability to understand complex problems like climate change, an odorless, tasteless, invisible gas that's going to change the planet, or a virus, an unseen, tiny microbe that is, so small that you could have 100,000 of them in your coffee cup and not know it. These things, they're very complex. It's hard for the human brain to understand how public health is able to prevent diseases with vaccines. And that is, there's never been a time when you got brownie points for prevention, even though your mother's told you what my mother told me, which is a stitch in time save 9.
Yes, she did say that.
In case of public health, a stitch in time saves millions of lives. Yes. Those are still hard things to understand. Mm-hmm. We don't fund public health the way we fund medicine.
Right.
I think I've given 20 commencement speeches at medical schools over the years. I always begin by saying the proper role of a medical school is to be a department inside a school of public health. I don't always get a lot of applause for that line. Yeah. That's the way it should be. We should be thinking about the environment and then humans and then public health. Then we should be thinking about clinical medicine, not the other.
Right. It seems like it would make the stuff at that stuff at the very end that we are focusing on a little bit easier if we focused on maybe the root of the problem. But
let me give you another number just to put in your head. WHO has taken a lot of flack unjustly. They made mistakes, but nothing on the order that they have been accused of. The budget for WHO, I would wager that the global budget for WHO for 220 countries that are members of WHO, its annual budget is probably less than the annual budget of the Philadelphia Health Department. So, and its structure is insane. It has a board of directors of countries who have to agree on things.
Right.
So it's unfair to blame them when it is us who are not funding enough for global health. And we're not putting that in as a priority. So if we are lucky and we get a new president, public health will be one of Biden's priorities, and he's surrounded by some really good advisors. So I hope that's the case.
Whew. And I have a question just for me, because I am looking around and I feel like everybody else's background I see has a bunch of stuff that looks like it might be from all over the world, but is probably from Pottery Barn. And I feel like yours are actually from all over the world. So do you have a favorite, like if you feel comfortable sharing, token, like travel memorabilia piece behind you that like you feel like sharing with us? Because I'm seeing
what's back there?
I feel like there's so much back there.
Treasures.
Yeah.
I have pictures of my guru. This is my teacher, Neem Crowley Baba, that I lived with in India and who told me to go work on the smallpox program and said to me, smallpox would be eradicated. It was God's gift to humanity.
He
because of the work of all the people working on it, and that God would lift this one form of suffering from the back of humanity. And then I have this here. Here's one that I really like.
Oh, I was hoping you would pick that one. Yes.
So this is from Kathmandu. It was made out of the lost wax process. You can kind of see all the repoussé on the back.
Oh, my gosh, that's gorgeous.
I really like that very much.
Wow. Thank you.
Oh, my gosh. What a treasure. How cool is that? I would play the next clip, which was what is in your trunk, but we've run over. So the answer is golf clubs, which we loved because it showed that he had balance and that he knows there's a time to be serious and a time to play, which I think we all know at Brain Candy. That's sort of our thing.
That is our motto.
So that was really cool. And I'm so glad you asked him about those items because that was really special.
I wanted to see every single one, and I was hoping. I'm like, he wouldn't have made it so you could see him in the camera if he didn't want people to maybe check him out. So
yeah.
Oh, it was, and that was the exact one I wanted him to show me because I totally have the one that is like the knockoff from Pottery Barn of that. So
and that's okay too.
Right, totally. Because I'm like bringing in the vibe, the feel of that. Since I can't be there, I'm going to make it feel like that with some Buddha statues and stuff.
But I really felt honored that he spoke with us and shared
so many
his
great stories.
And I know we need to wrap up, so I wanted to say a few thank yous.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited that I didn't cry throughout this whole thing, so I might now. You never know.
Oh,
because it's very
I love
moving.
When you get emotional about every time we come and do this event. Susie always has like a warm, special place. I was telling my boyfriend today, I'm like, I'm so nervous. He's like, why? You're never nervous. I'm like, I know because this is an important one, and this is like Pittsburgh, and this matters. And but this is like extra important. He's like,
it's super special. So I wanted to, of course, thank the University of Pittsburgh for having Brain Candy again. Thank you to USIS for facilitating it. I have a whole list. The English Language Institute at Pitt, of course. And Larry Brilliant for taking time. You can imagine how busy he is right now. Thank you to the scientists. What if I was like, thank you to the scientists, the doctors.
I was like, that's right up my alley to cry for stuff.
No,
like
for real. The first responders.
Yes.
People who read and who believe in science. Because I feel like a lot of people are disheartened right now, so I just want to encourage them to not give up.
Mm-hmm. The vaxxers, not the anti-vaxxers.
Yes, people who are open to new information, who can think critically, and, the Brainiacs out there.
Yes.
Thank you. Don't give up. Please vote.
Mm-hmm. Don't stop learning.
And, of course, thank you, Rob. I know Rob has a couple things he wants to say. I think he's giving away goodies. Ooh. So he can come back and do that. But for real, for me, Larry represents all the people who are committed to learning and understanding the world and the people within it. And that's real special.
And thank you, Susie, for your wonderful interviewing and amazing questions and for bringing
Likewise, you did what's in your trunk in his office.
That's really selfish, the question to ask.